Hi, this is Casey Seiler, the Times Union's managing editor. This is a special bonus edition of the CapCon podcast. I am turning things around a little bit, hijacking the show, and talking with David Lombardo, whose outstanding seven episode,
feels like 8.
7-episode chronicle Tales from the Coup concludes this week. I suggested that Dave sit down and take a little bit of questions about what I think has just been a remarkable achievement. Certainly the best thing the Times Union has done in the podcast space so far. I couldn't be more pleased with it. And as a survivor of the coup myself, I have hung on every episode. So Dave, let me just start by saying congratulations. I think it's a remarkable piece of work.
Thanks, Casey.
So why did you want to do this? At one point, Jim O'Dotto, my former Capitol colleague, said, I think it's great that you're doing this, but come on, this isn't like Ken Burns stuff,
No, not World War I, it's not the Civil War. So for me, my experience of the Senate coup happened as a intern with the Legislative Gazette, and at the time, I don't think I really understood what was going on. I barely could grasp the fact that we had a bicameral legislature in New York. This was news to me, and it was just a defining experience. I thought it was a cool soap opera, and through the years, I hate to say this, I actually thought about maybe I should write a book about this. Well, I'm not a good writer, so that was a problem. I thought maybe we'll fictionalize it with a young Legislative Gazette intern being the star, kind of the way Jack Casey wrote a book about the experience and made himself the star. And this was something that just sort of fit when I realized I was doing podcasts. And Slow Burn, which was a podcast Slate did about Watergate and then the President Clinton impeachment.
I'm a big fan of that as well. It's really good.
That was like, this should be done for the Senate coup. And obviously it wasn't somebody at Slate who was going to do it. So I started doing interviews in 2018, started talking to people about it. And people responded. I was able to get David Patterson right away. That wasn't a big challenge. So then I was like, okay, I can do this. And then the Times Union was really supportive about it, saying, sure, you want to do this? Go nuts. Talked me down from doing like 12, 13 parts to something more manageable. And here we are today.
What were some of the challenges you faced in just putting it together? It's how many, you must have done, 30 interviews? Thereabouts?
Yeah, probably. More than 20. And there are people who get left on the cutting room floor because, blame Diane Savino for being so colorful. I went around, started in 2018, collecting interviews all the way until the day after the trailer dropped. And even still now, I've been doing interviews as the podcast is going on with some of these gets. But it was, going through all the old clips New York for the Times Union, basically watching every episode of New York Now from 2009, and then going back to people as the process wore on to corroborate things.
But you're right that the number of interviews made it kind of hard to whittle everything down when it came time to make the episodes themselves. I shot for 30-minute episodes, but anyone who's listened to the show knows that some of them went 40, 50 minutes. And I would just be sitting at home at night on my couch trying to figure out how to trim everything down. And then on Thursdays, I've been using, your old office to narrate and get these episodes out in time for Fridays. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of work, but it's been fun. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't fun.
Diane Savino, as you mentioned, is just a terrific personality who you really weave so well kind of throughout the whole show. You spoke to her. How long did you speak to her to mine all that material?
Senator Savino and I spoke for an hour, and this was something that almost didn't happen because initially I reached out to her, and she said, yes, I'll do this totally. Then early 2019, I'm working with her staff to try to figure out a time for this, and we never hammer anything out. I dropped the trailer, and she sends me an email saying, we never talked. And I was like, I know, why, And that day, though, we set something up and talked for an hour, and it was great. And the podcast wouldn't be what it is without her, because it's two things that really make her stand out as a guest. One,
Foul language.
Well, yeah, she's very colorful.
Yes.
Her descriptions of things
kidding.
are great. Oh, but
Yes.
the foul language helps paint a picture. But then two is her memory is great. Her recall is so vivid. She knows who's in the room. She knows when John Sampson's like calling her Diesel and this and that. So that really made for a great interview. Because some of the people, they're like, well, during the coup, Elliot Spitzer was governor. And I'm like, no, he wasn't. And so then those people, it's problematic. What do you use? What do you not use? How do you make things work? Sometimes you'll have guests who'll say, the next day we did this. And you're reading news stories and it's like, well, it wasn't the next day. It was the next week. Do I leave that in? How do I do that? But with her, it's like, but here's what we did at 5 o'clock, then at 6 o'clock, and then let me go to the next day for you, Dave.
Did you have anybody who called you up after the first episode or two and said, whoa, you got to talk to me about this?
So Craig Johnson was another one, Senator Craig Johnson, a former Long Island senator, who was one who we had talked a little bit about getting him on, and then once the coup was rolling, though, he came on right away, and again was another late addition who added a lot of quality to the show, and not just because it's amusing to hear him talk about going to Curver Creamery all the time for ice cream.
And ducking out to the Lee outlets.
Yes, like any good Long Islander.
So the sergeant at arms couldn't haul him back into the chamber. That was a great detail.
Yeah, but besides him, no one else was like, oh, let me come on. Unfortunately, Pedro and Hiram never gave me a call at that point to say, this is great, let me come on.
Well, which begs the question, my next this is perfect segue. Who are the ones who you really tried to get, but ultimately turned you down or simply didn't respond? And who are the ones that you just knew you weren't going to be able to get them because they're in federal prison?
So I wrote letters to Malcolm Smith, Dean Skelos.
He's still in prison, right?
Yep, and John Sampson.
Dean Skelos still in prison.
Yep.
John Sampson's still in prison.
Yeah, no responses to those letters.
You just named three either majority leaders or conference leaders.
At one point or the other, ran the Senate basically.
Yeah.
We had phone numbers for Pedro Espada.
Out of prison now.
Yep, and Hiram Montserrat. Did not work. I even tried going through the Queen's Democratic machine for Hiram Montserrat because he's a district leader at this point. Yep. The phone number they have for him, left a voicemail. It never got back to me. Ruben Diaz, his staff said he would, think about it, I guess. That never happened. Carl Kruger, could never connect with him. Tried going through multiple intermediaries. I thought he would have some interesting stories to tell. But besides that, I think that's pretty much. Well, there's some Senator
Golisano.
Yeah, and I actually and I got in touch with his PR people. He thought about it apparently for some time, and then said no, thank you. But also there were some Senate Republican staffers I had hoped to get on. Some of the people who had helped orchestrate things on the floor. Same thing on the Democratic side. Shelley Mayer was Democratic counsel at the time. Her staff, when I reached out to them initially, was like, sure, we'd love to do this. And I think once they realized, wait, what is this thing he's doing? I think that was definitely something they didn't want to revisit. Neil Breslin, who was on the dais at the time of the coup, got some flack for letting it happen. He was great. He had no problems talking to me. So I really appreciated that. I just remembered one person who I got late to was George Maziarz, who one of the few leaders, he never went to prison, took plea on a misdemeanor, but he had initially said, yeah, I'll do this, had some sort of, issues going on, and then right before the week I was going to need him, he and I connected, and I think it was really great.
He was very frank. I have vivid memories of the coup. Yeah. One of the most vivid is the one session where they tried to do it.
Dueling sessions.
And I believe it was Andrew Stewart Cousins up on the dais, and George Winter was down in the pit where all the reporters were at the desks, and he actually was banging his gavel on a desk where Irene Liu, my colleague, who was in the Capitol Bureau back then, was had put her stuff down, all of her gear. And I just remembered, hey, that's Irene's desk. Don't bang on it. Yep. But it's just too much. So this is now wrapped up. So I guess, of course, the next question is, what have you done for me lately? What do you think are some of the other government stories from recent years that deserve maybe not 7 episodes, but this type of telling. I have my own ideas, but I want to hear yours first.
Okay. Well, so I think you could do 2 or 3 episodes on Michael Bragman's attempted coup of Shelley Silver.
That'd be a good one.
Especially because it'll be the 20th anniversary next year, and everyone's probably looking forward to that. And that's something I actually had reached out to some of the members about, and unfortunately Michael Bragman didn't seem to really interested in talking about it.
You'd probably have to get Bragman if you wanted to do that.
Exactly.
Shelley probably ain't talking about it.
Hard to imagine.
Yeah.
And then there's little things that I'm really interested in, like Capital Tonight, which is now going off the air. I mean, as a young reporter, I'm still 31, at the Daily Gazette, I did a whole day with Liz and her team because I thought Capital Tonight was amazing. I think it's great. I think it's so unique and valuable. I would love to do almost like an oral history about how it came along, start and talk with Brian Taff and its evolution, the different reporters that have gone through there, Caitlin Ross, Aaron Billups, and now Nick Reisman, and just what that experience has been like. Because I think, it's interesting to me. And then the other thing is the transition from Elliot Spitzer to David Patterson. Those, less than a week of handing off the state government. I mean, that's a crazy experience. I remember watching video. I think it's Risa Heller giving a gaggle in the Red Room to reporters who were trying to understand what's going on, and it was just amazing watching her do this. I brought that video up when Eric Schneiderman was on his way out, and we're looking at how a transition was done, and so that's something I would really be interested in exploring. Not so much Spitzer's downfall or Patterson's rise, but what was happening as you hand off a government. What do you want to see?
I think the 2011 legalization of same-sex marriage would be a really good one. Same kind of thing. I think two or three, half-hour, 40-minute episodes. I think that would be fascinating. I initially, as you were describing those, I was thinking, well, those have all been covered. The downfall of Elliot Spitzer, but so was the coup. The coup was covered, wall to wall by multiple outlets, including the Times-Union.
We had daily coverage.
Through the 5 weeks that it lasted. Yeah, and when you say daily coverage, that includes like Saturday. Mm-hmm. I remember, I've probably told you the story before, going from my son's Little League game down to the Capitol in flip-flops, shorts, and a T-shirt for that day's compulsory, gavel in, gavel out session. And at first I was like, should I throw a change of clothes in the car? Should I put, tie in a blazer? And I was like, I'm not going to do it. They're not going to do anything here.
No.
So,
anyway. Yeah, you weren't missing anything. So, and that's kind of trying to figure out what to do with the podcast moving forward, because I think we're going to definitely keep doing weekly interviews. I like doing these deep dives into topics, and I think there's lots of great guests to talk about on a variety of things that are happening in state government. But I definitely have an interest in doing more of these, and just hopefully not spending as much time necessarily on them, but still making it something that people in the Capitol are really interested in. And so far, the response has been great.
Not only that, but we are talking 2 days after you took top honors for the CapCon podcast in the state AP award competition for Division III, which the Times-Union competes in. And that was on episodes of the CapCon podcast from last year. Mm-hmm. So this doesn't even include all, of course, your good work on the coup.
With the caveat, though, that we don't necessarily know if anyone else actually got nominated. But theoretically, they could have said, this is garbage, we're not going to hand out an award this year. But,
Okay, well, I'll say 2 things about that. Number one, I think that the smart money is going to be on Tales from the Coup next year in that competition. And I think probably a couple of others, too, because I think it's such strong work. And number 2, I think a lot of outlets are going to look at the work you've done, not only on this, but on the CapCon podcast as well. And I think it is a very good template for how newspapers with talented people can do really good, meaningful work that has, as they say, a long tail. In other words, mm-hmm. I think that people are going to be listening to this for quite a while. So
hopefully.
That is all the apple polishing I will do.
Well, now we just need some people to start buying some advertising on it too. That would be if anybody's listening and they think this is, you want to read Albany Insiders
yes.
and like Diane Savino, this is the podcast for you to advertise
yes.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's been great. And hearing from you guys have been so supportive. And then just getting emails and just text messages and tweets from people that I don't know and finding out that they're listening to this. It's great. And hopefully at some point my wife will decide to check it out because she currently is boycotting. I don't know why, but...
All right, I'm going to stay out of this discussion, but, well, thanks very much. You have been listening to this special bonus edition of the CapCon podcast. I'm Times Union Managing Editor Casey Seiler, and I've been talking to David Lombardo, the auteur of Tales from the Coup. Thanks a lot, and have a great week.